When you're printing reports or when you're on Engage, when we do Engage, what you see at the top is your name and address or phone number or what have you. That gets pulled from this right here. These 5 lines are what generates that information. So if you need to change something, or if you don't want to have, your phone number there, or you need to add the EIN number for whatever the reason, things like that, that gets pulled from here. So you would just go up to, if you're on a Windows computer, you just go to File, Preferences, and System Preferences. If you're on a Mac, you go to CDM Preferences and System Preferences. System Preferences, that's making changes to the program no matter who you're logged in as. User Preferences is making changes to the program for when you're logged in. So it's only things that are going to affect you, like maybe what windows you might have open when you log in, or some things like that. That's what more of the user. So if you're not sure which one, chances are it's system, but just think, is everybody going to see this or just me? And things like terms, like we were talking about renaming some fields, that's something everybody would see. That isn't something that just I want to change, because if I do that and then my grandma goes in and she's like, why do they have like Army for blood type? What is that? But in mine it said military or what have you. So that is something that changes across the board with everyone. And that here where it says terms, these are your basic ones. So like address record window, connections, those tabs that were connections, they were in every window. Contributions, customers. So if you wanted to rename any of these, this is the default term on the right. On the left is whatever you want it to be. So let's say pastoral. I don't want it to say pastoral. I want it to say bishop notes. Now it's going to say bishop notes wherever it would say pastoral. Things like pledge and pledges, that's just singular, plural. Some of you guys it's called like estimate. If you want it to say pledge, you can go right in here and just rename it. If you were wanting to rename one of the fields in, let's say, the address record window. So you would click on membership and attendance, because that's where that window is located. And then you have 3 options: address fields, individual fields, or visitation fields. You guys at the state office wouldn't really use the visitation, but address and individual, if I click here, these are the fields in the address record that I can change. If I click on individual, these are the fields that I can change in that record. So for example, let's try, there's the blood type. I could go in here and I could just put, I don't know, military. And when I save it, when we go back into the individual record, you're going to see where that's changed, and so on. If you go into contributions, the terms are over there. But that's where you set terms with all of that. Defaults in here, if you have like continual things that you just don't want to have to type. So for example, big city. Because it's a default, when I add a record, like an address record, it's going to default that city. I don't know if you noticed that when we added it, the city was kind of already populated in state and zip. I can override that. It's just another time saver to have it like that. Same with mailing code. You can set the mailing code to just be, receives all mail. Every time you add a new record, it's going to say that. You can change it, but just by default, it's going to be that way. Apparently, we can also set it to church, so everybody could belong to Akron East Market Street. Then we forget to change it and wonder why in the world everybody belongs there. But this is just a more time-saving thing that you can do. You don't really do much with attendance. Contributions, For notices, you can tell it to save into these particular things. I'm just kind of walking you through. We're not going to go through everything, but see how there are so many options. Do it. When we start and we work more on contributions tomorrow, you'll see we'll talk about linking it to accounting and all of those types of stuff, how to set the entry. I can tell it to show the mailing name or the salutation name for that giving unit record. Remember, the difference there is whatever you put. And just so on. There's just a lot. With accounting, if you did purchase orders, don't show the option to accrue. You can hide the vendor code in the invoice. Just different things like that. Payroll, we'll talk more about this, but this is where you set the direct deposit and so on. So see, this changes it for everything. Default badge options for it, and same with roommates. So the one thing, though, I really wanted to make sure you get to, we have 2 tabs that all churches do not have, only regional. You have a COG tab. And this here, if you currently use the system and you have been importing treasurer's reports and stuff, you've got this set right. But if not, or you go and it just doesn't seem right or you get an error, what this is doing is it's telling the system what state or region you're in. Without going into a ton of detail and get redundant on Thursday, when they report online or they use CDM and they hit submit report, it comes here to international offices. They will process it. When they process it, they send those reports to folders for each state and region. And so what you're doing is telling CDM which folder to pull it from. So if I was to click Arizona, or both Ohio and Arizona, when I go to import the treasurer's reports, what happens? I'm going to have Arizona's reports. So if you're already doing these reports, you're fine, don't touch it. Please don't. It'll be interesting. But that's why, though, this is very important. And the same goes for ministers. It's the same process. If they upload it online, if they go to their Church God website and they report online, as long as you have that done and they've put that they're in Ohio, once international processes it, it goes into that folder, and then you get it for whatever state or region you have marked in here. In here, too, for ministers' reports, this isn't treasurers. This is where you would set if they want to give, and you can choose here. We'll go more in depth with this on Thursday and all that. Girls' clubs, the rest of these are for that. We aren't going into a lot with that, and here's why. We only know what we know at CDM. We're not, unless international offices gets a hold of us, or one of you guys get a hold of us, we don't know of whatever it is. Remember when they changed the layout and the look of the treasurer's reports? We had no idea until somebody said, hey, this isn't the same anymore. So then when they did, they gave it to us, and we were able to make it match. Girls' clubs, has come to our attention, has changed in what they want the people to report. We didn't have that. We do now. So they're building that change. And because that change is getting, worked on, I don't want to go into something that's not going to be the same once it's done. Does that make sense? So that's why when you see that. And so if you guys ever see, just kind of a side note, if the international offices make changes to things like the layout of a treasurer's report, or women's ministries just decided they wanted to totally change things, somebody let us know. Because if not, we ain't changing it. Because we don't know. So it's those types of things. And girls' ministries reporting is a great example of that. So, but that's what the rest of the tabs, that's why I'm not going into that right now. Just because we don't, it's not matching right now what international offices is wanting to see reported, okay? But This is where those setups go. Now, if you were in regional, this is just like, again, it's more terms, just changing all of that. Okay. Any questions on how you can change those fields? That's the biggest thing I wanted in here, that, and there's a couple of settings. And again, when we do accounting, we'll walk through some of that again, but payroll, that setup goes in here because it's dealing with the entire system. Now, I do want to show you something because it was another one of those moments for me when it's done. Because I made a change to a term, it's got to change my terms. There is a way in the user preference window, because for me, when I log in, I can tell it what window I want it to just automatically open for me. Because I know when I get into the system, I'm always going to be in the individual record window or the church record window. You can set it to do that, so you don't have to open it every time. So I'm in user preference. This is my personal. If somebody else logged into their username, it's not going to look the same unless they set it up this way. So in user preference, the toolbars at the top, the handy-dandy little buttons that you can do, you can tell which ones you want. So let's say I want the accounting toolbar to be shown. Can you see? Yeah. And I can tell you where I want it, bottom, left, right, floating out there in space. Wherever I want it, I can choose that. So if I leave accounting, say like at the top, I leave like ledger, and let's just put it to the left. And I can guarantee you tomorrow it's not going to be that way because it's going to mess with me because I'm so used to it. But let's do it so you can see how it works. These are the different toolbars that you can have. And it's just options so that you can push the buttons from the toolbar instead of the menu. And then, where is it? Whoops, go back. Under defaults, notice how it says at startup. Right now, at startup, open nothing. Or you can open the Welcome to CDM Plus window that has the buttons. Years ago, I wasn't trained on that, and so when that started to come, it was messing with me, and I couldn't use the buttons because I was, you know how your brain just doesn't always, I work in flow charts, clearly, because buttons were throwing me. So I had to hit it. I had it, don't open anything, because I would just close it anyways. But some love that, and then it disappeared, and they don't know what happened to it. You can come in here and tell it, open up that applications window, and you'll have that window, and it will show you, I'll show you what it looks like, and it'll show you the buttons, and you can choose buttons, because some people do work better with the visual like that. You can also tell it to open a menu item, and it chooses it that way. So let's say I want to open membership, and no, let's not do membership. I worked more in church records. So now when I log back into CDM, the church record window is going to always come up. You can go as far as in the church record window, setting it to every time that window opens, it has a specific search. So in other words, you could set it to open and it shows all active churches, and I'll show you that. So then if I have that set, then when I log into CDM, church records with all of my churches are always right there. I don't have to go and open it. Again, it's just another time saver, and for me it was like, that's actually pretty cool. I love that you can do that. I like showing little tips and things like that. You can do your default font that way. You can, and these are defaults, not that you can't override them. They're just defaults. Any questions? If you ever want to see if you need an update, just click Web Update, or you can go, I think it's File and Update, and it'll check. But you won't have probably that problem. You can, the different characters for keyboards, membership and attendance. You guys probably aren't going to run into this much, but let's talk about bishop notes. If he did want to go into church records or individual records and he wanted to make notes for things, you can do that if you get them all set up to do so. That being said, if I'm in my login and I create a note, right now, only the people I have selected, which is nobody, has access to that note. If I make it private, only I see that note. So let's say my administrator and I are the only ones who need to have access to any of those notes that I put in what we've now titled as Bishop's Notes, or in your case, it would say pastoral. Why is this important that I really stress this? And it's the same with visitation. If you are the only one, and that's fine and it's good, that has access to the notes, but if you ask your secretary or you ask somebody else to go in and, hey, can you pull up and see when the last time we visited this person is? They're not going to be able to. Can you look at the notes that I put in the record to see what happened with so-and-so or what, They can't do that because you've not given them access to it. So if you want to utilize this, but you also have somebody who you might be calling on to look up those notes, you need to make sure you go into your preferences here, the user preference, and give them access to those notes or visitation. Okay. On contributions, it's just more of for speed. The other thing is if you do use an image scanner or the reader for it, you have to check that. That being said, don't get super excited because I just talked about an image scanner. If you have a current scanner with us, this is where you set it. As far as new ones, right now we don't have that to get over. This company that we use, last I heard, had discontinued those, so you couldn't get those specific ones, so we're having to kind of make adjustments. Kind of can't control when they decide that they don't want to make or produce, you know what I mean? So we're having to readjust. But if you do currently, and you got somebody new who's wanting to start using the check scanner or what have you, you can come in here for them under their login and give them access to doing that. Roommate, we'll dive deeper into this a little bit later, but with Roommate, if you can set certain formatting that you want for it, for start time, different elements, things like that for you. It's not system-wide, it's more for you. Same with patients. Scheduling, you can change your colors, you can let your background colors be something else. So every once in a while I get a call of why I do this and it looks great. It has exactly what I need. They print it. It doesn't look at all like mine. What's wrong? There's no difference, but there is. User settings. I have these colors. She's got red. Why? It's in the settings. It was interesting. And I'll be honest, that the first time I got a call on that, I didn't know you could do that. And I was just like, let me get back to you on that. I have no idea what's wrong. How does that happen? User settings. So usually if it's a difference like that and everything else looks, check your settings, especially with Roommate, because that's probably what's wrong. Big thing on that is monthly calendar. Their calendar wasn't looking right. That's because they didn't have the formatting set like they had the other, and so on. Okay? And then check-in, check-out. It's just your basic individual lookups and stuff like that. Okay? Any questions on settings?